So welcome back. Had a little bit of a break there, but I want to focus in on the next area, and that is what advice, it's a question that was asked several years ago by a very smart young man. What advice would you give others who are trying to develop their own leadership skills? I think one of the areas that we probably should consider is that, aside from everything else we've discussed, but maybe another area is to adapt. Learn how to adapt when we're faced with challenges. Learn how to be like the chameleon who can change the colors based on the atmosphere, based on the landscape, based on the surroundings. How do we learn to adapt? And I don't mean change our morals or our values. That has nothing to do with this particular discussion. What I'm talking about here is how do we learn to adapt when life gets overwhelming, when life gets to be something that is completely challenging and trying. How do we learn to adapt in the face of those challenges and trials? And we've already discussed several areas of having a positive attitude, having a winning attitude, being the type of leader that exercises honesty and integrity. But this particular area of adapting, I think, leads us into another thought, which is that leaders are never happy with the status quo. They're always looking for new opportunities. They're always looking for ways to improve. And they're always looking for ways to not only improve the product, the company, themselves, but to also improve their team. Team members will notice that. Team members notice when you are interested in their success. Don't ever forget that. So I think that an area that we have to talk about here for just a moment is that if we're not happy with the status quo, what do? Well, we go look for new opportunities. Could be looking for a way to develop a new product line. It could be sitting down and brainstorming and coming up with a set of new ideas that could lead us into the next phase of our company growth. Could lead us into the next area that could literally create not only new products, but maybe even a new industry. Think about the times where you've been involved in brainstorming. And I know that this particular session, we're not really covering brainstorming in a lot of detail. But, and we will at a later time in a lot of detail, a whole workshop just on brainstorming and how to do that. But for now, the brainstorming sessions that you may have been involved in your lifetime, think about the positive charge that you receive from that. Because as we look for new opportunities of developing a new product, creating a new revenue stream, creating multiple streams of income. Those are the traits of a leader where the status quo, sticking to the same thing over and over and over year after year, doesn't work for them. Because there are new opportunities. Thank goodness there are opportunities, because there are so many different ways to improve on what we're doing. We don't have the final product today. I remember in our manufacturing company, we started off with a product, and 8 iterations later, we finally found the type of product that would work really well in all types of setting in our vending business. However, that was only good for a few months, and we had to keep coming up with new ideas and new concepts and new opportunities for that particular product line. So never staying with the status quo, but looking for new opportunities. And then I want you to think about the quote that's in The World's Greatest Salesman. Great book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And you think about the individual in The World's Greatest Salesman, whose name is Pathros. His quote, the quote that was developed there is really important. Failure will never overtake you if your determination to succeed is strong enough. Those are the types of leadership skills that I'd hope that I could pass on to you a little bit. If you're trying to develop your own leadership skills, remember that failure sometimes happens. Failure happens in business every day. Failure happens in our personal lives. Failure happens all around us. But the point is, do we pick up ourselves off the ground and not let failure overtake us? How strong is your determination to be successful? How strong is your determination to make your team successful, your company successful? Those are the things we have to answer and figure out what we're truly made of. Next area that I think is important for any of us to develop, and for especially maybe some other individuals who are seeking out a way to develop their own personal leadership skills, and that is remain confident. Leaders are confident in their ability to lead. They're confident in the way that they present themselves, the way that they speak, the way that they present themselves in front of others, the way that they present themselves even off camera or out of a meeting, and they do the things that are the right things to do for the company, for the team, which will eventually also be good for them as well. But leaders are confident. Remember that word confidence. Remember how important that is. And if you're not confident, then fake it really well. Fake it until you do find that confidence that you need in order to lead. And that's another area in developing leadership skills that I believe are important. And probably the last area that I believe is important for a leader to recognize, and that is that leaders lead through example. And they earn the right to be heard. Leaders earn the right to be heard, to stand up in front of their group, to stand up in front of their team, to stand up in front of the company, maybe even in front of the world. Who knows where that may be. Leaders are the ones who have earned the right to be heard. Well, how have they earned that right? Well, we've already discussed many areas, and that's really the things that I don't need to go into too much detail. But if you think about some of the leaders who stand up in front of an audience and who captivate them, it's because they've found success in one form or another. It doesn't always have to be financial success. It can be success as a leader, that those individuals feel confident about following that individual. So through their example, leaders have earned the right to be heard. Are you that type of leader? Is that part of your mantra? Is this an area that, as you think about adapting and never being happy with status quo and having that confidence that exudes that you know what you're doing, and then earning the right to be heard because of your previous example? If you haven't earned that right to be heard yet, then change your example, change the way you deal with other people, and start thinking about how the team can be successful together. That's an area that I think is really important for us to figure out. So the next question that we have to ask ourselves is, within your own organization, how are you ensuring, or how does your company ensure, that it is developing the right type of leaders that it needs for the future? So let's answer that question. Let's figure out what makes that question work for us. And here's a couple of things that I want you to consider. Leaders can quickly change their fears into confidence. I wish you were in front of me right now, because I know that I'd see a lot of hands. But what I would like to ask you is, how many of you have ever been fearful? I'm going to raise my hand. I've been fearful. I didn't know what the next step was. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be from a decision that I was about to make. I had a good idea of it, but I didn't know for certainty. So how do we, based on our last conversation about confidence, just remember that good, solid leaders can quickly change their fears into confidence, that others will feel that confidence and they'll feel comfortable with what you're going to do, with your decisions you're going to be making. And I want you to remember that as you turn those fears into confidence, then that is an area where you are starting to earn that right to be heard next time a decision has to be made. Because, let's face it, we don't always have all the answers every time we get up in the morning. I mean, we don't have the answers to know what is going to happen in the future. At least I don't. And unfortunately, I have not been blessed with that crystal ball or that money tree in my backyard. But I do know that when we have confidence in our own abilities And me personally, when I have confidence in my own abilities and I have confidence and faith that a higher source, that God will step in and help me through my decisions and help me through some of my fears, then I can conquer the world. So think about how we not only take those fears that we may have and turn those fears into confidence, but then think about what others are doing as you do turn those fears into confidence. And sometimes you share those fears, sometimes you don't. Kind of depends on the moment, I guess. But the next area in developing leaders within our own organization is a way for us to, for me personally, is to have others that I trust. In other words, I don't have all the answers all the time. And there's a way for each of us as leaders that we're going to have to learn to trust others, to take over the reins, to take over responsibilities. What if you were to go on vacation? You're not always going to be able to be there. Well, what leaders do you have in place that you trust that can take over and make decisions while you're away? Probably more importantly, what leaders do you have on your team currently that you trust that will help you find the answers, find the new product line, find the new client, find the new batch of customers, whatever that may be? Who do you trust to help you do your job better? And do you need to work on that particular level of trust that you may or may not have with others that are on your team? Give them responsibilities. Give them opportunities to make decisions. Work with them to not only make the decisions, but to kind of know what the outcome may be if they make that particular decision. The point here is that we need to start learning to trust others, because we're not always going to be there to make the decision. We're not always going to have every answer that is completely, absolutely, 100% correct. But as a team, and as you learn to trust others, you will find those areas that are important to not only you and to the rest of your team members, but now you can work together as that team and moving things forward. And the other one, the other area, is that I'd like to throw out there is that leaders will learn the art of listening. And not only will they learn the art of listening, but they'll learn that art of listening before they start engaging their mouth. One of the things that drives me nuts, quite honestly, is when you're trying to get a point across and somebody else keeps cutting you off because they always want to make their point. They always want to throw out their opinion first. I think it's just common courtesy, number one, to listen to what the other's point of view may be, but also to allow you to say a few things, to get your own point of view out there, and to allow for a cohesive professional debate between two individuals and learn more about what they are saying. What's behind the words? What's behind the phrases? What's behind the emotion? So I think learning the art of listening is also an area that we want to instill in our own organization, how we develop leaders for the future. I don't know if I need to cover any more on the art of listening. I think that there's probably an entire workshop that we can go through in just the art of listening alone. I think that's probably an important area. But to simplify things in this particular segment, when we're working together as a team, and when we have an opportunity to be together as a team and not be overbearing, but to become a good leader and a good listener, that's where good things can happen within an organization. So learn the art and the skill of listening.